I stand before the daycare, fists tight. The brightly colored walls, doors, and windows now appear faded. Not due to age, but due to the thick layer of spiderweb laying over the entire building. Thousands of webs spun by thousands of spiders. Just earlier this morning, the building was normal as ever, but the spiders crawled out of the walls, the floors, the ceilings, and began spinning everywhere. Thousands of spiders, yellow and black spiders bigger than my hand, spun the webs and kept spinning them bigger and bigger over every free space that I could see. I grabbed the children that I could carry, and I ran outside, where I found the other staff, a few carrying children as well, but most weren't carrying any. I realized this, and even as the others were calling for help, I made sure the children I carried out were safe as I turned back to the daycare. The spiders are still spinning their webs. I can tell from the tone on the phone that help will take too long to arrive. I could still hear the babies crying from inside. I couldn't leave the children, the babies, inside of the daycare. Everyone was scared, too scared to go back in. I was too scared to stay outside. So as I plunged back to the daycare, pushing through the spider web, arms up, pushing forward as I made my way back into that spidery hell. I ran as quickly as I could through the webs. The webs on the floor and walls weren't slowing me down yet, but there was so much of it that it did seem like the spiders were trying to slow me down. And then there was the spiders themselves. Eyes glittering like jewels, the bodies like obsidian and gold, all watching me from the corners of the room, their patient legs crossed like they were judging me. Silent observers as I pushed through what they made. Stoic observers while I pushed through, getting to the nursery where the cribs were kept. The hallway's webs were thicker, slowing down my shoes. The webbing so thick that the room looked like it was smoking. The lights above, buzzing behind the webbing. Still shining through, but looking weaker than I liked. The walls so thick with webbing that I couldn't read the names and writing on the walls. I could only dimly see the shape of hearts, rainbows, and stars. The spiders above still watching in far thicker clusters now. Their colony judging me for pushing through pylons of web to get into the nursery. When I make it to the nursery, I pause for a moment when I see the scale of what the spiders had done. I could hear the buzzing of the lights above, but I couldn't see the light above. There was only the dim light of the distant shatterproof window. The cribs were covered in the webbing, looking almost like drapery. Drapery full of those cursed spiders crawling over the web, now larger than before, at least 30 centimeters across, their bodies bigger than my palm, their eyes glowing gold as their bodies, their chalaria sharp and dripping with something that smelled foul, even from where I stood. And those were just the spiders on the outside of the cribs. Inside of the cribs, I could see transparent spiders that were much smaller than the ones on the outside, only the size of the infant's hands, looking almost like cotton balls, but by the dozen, they crawled over the sleeping babies. All of the babies were still asleep. So, whose crying did I hear? I wondered for a moment before I decided it wasn't important, as I grabbed the slings we used for carrying the babies, pushing the spiders out of the way, both large and small. The spiders simply moved out of the way and kept staring at me, like they were waiting for something, or someone. I had used the slings on my back and front before, but I had never used them to carry any sleeping babies before. It was heavy, and I couldn't move as quickly as I did before. Running with the babies would be dangerous to them. Still, thankfully, they were asleep as I began to waddle my way to the door. As I made my way to the door, I heard a sharp crackle. It was like the sound of dried wood splintering, and it was close to me. I felt something inside of me tell me to freeze. So I did. The crackling continued, not as strong as earlier, but loud enough and close enough to know it was near me. I slowly turned to face the sound as it shifted from the sound of crackling to the sound of dry wood rubbing against wood. The sound of dry bones rubbing against dry bones as I turned to the sound. I saw the shining jewels first, 8 of them, the size of softballs, looking like a dark grape jelly in the way they jiggled. The head they were set in was as golden as the sun. The head bigger than my body, connected to an abdomen that filled up the rest of the nursery ceiling. The legs were carefully folded as it unfolded and began to dangle from the ceiling. I realized in that moment the reason the lights were dark in this room wasn't because of the webbing, but because it was blocked by the body of this giant spider. The black legs descended as it made its way down to the floor. Up close, I could see that the legs weren't an opaque black like it looked like with the smaller spiders. I could see fluids pushing through as the legs moved, and I heard that sound of dry bones again, made by the 2 massive calaria, the fangs, rubbed against each other in anticipation, strong enough and big enough to crush my skull. And then I heard the dry bones speak. It didn't speak through its own mouth. It spoke through all the other spiders in the room. Spiders who clicked their jaws in such a way it sounded approximately like human speech. Only one? I thought you were caretakers. How selfish of them to leave you to die alone, Dry Bones said as it backed away from me, the large eyes still watching me as the massive spider covered the window with its body and its legs still stretched across the room. I thought at first it was trying to let me leave when it responded. My children need to learn to hunt. Surely you understand as a mother, Dry Bones said as the spiders on the walls and ceiling began to make their way down towards me. I turned and I ran as quickly as I could without hurting the children. The webs even thicker as I pushed through both spider and web alike. The webs were far thicker now. It was like pushing through a layer of wires and getting harder and harder as I kept pushing. A fact I remembered hearing a long time ago as I kept trying to get through the webs and the spiders. Spider silk was 10 times stronger than steel, and these spiders were weaving them thick. So even a centimeter of web silk was like pushing through 10 centimeters of steel. Still, I kept pushing myself, even as the spiders crawled over me, their legs and jaws biting into my flesh as I shielded the sleeping babies with my body, and I kept pushing forward. Their venom making me woozy, the light forward getting dimmer, the silk and spiders getting thicker. Too many spiders to even try and push them away now. I still kept pushing myself forward into the light. A dim circle in a long, dark tunnel. I still kept pushing. It was like pushing through steel while carrying 6 lives, but I kept pushing forward, step by step, through the venom, through the silk, through the spiders. Then my extended hands could feel the air. I could smell fresh air ahead. Now with my last burst of strength, I pushed myself forward into the light, the fresh air giving my head a little clarity, where I could see the other staff and children. I didn't let myself relax. Not yet. I could still feel the venom through my body as I stood on weak legs as I called out, "Someone, grab the children. I'm poisoned," I said with a calmer tone than I thought was possible in that moment. I noticed that the others grabbed the children as I finally felt the adrenaline fade from my body as I fell forward. Except instead of falling forward into the cement, someone caught me. Someone whose touch was as warm as an autumn day and as cool as a summer's breeze. A touch that seemed to keep me anchored to reality. I could feel his gentle touch lift my chin so my eyes could meet his. His eyes were like the moon during the morning, his smile as clever as a rabbit's dance, his presence like an old friend's. An old friend that you meet during many parties. One that has drank with you many times. A friend that has guided you home during your weakest moments. Who whispered in your ear like an intrusive thought. As I looked at him, I felt like I had met him many times, but I had only seen his face for the first time. Today. "Sis Nancy?" I groggily asked him, vaguely aware of everyone else staring at me like I was insane. I was also aware of the fact that the venom in my body was passing away, like a hangover fading, except far quicker than I ever knew a hangover could pass. The man didn't nod. He didn't shake his head. He said nothing. He lied like most men breathed. So with no breath and no words, he answered my question with silence that echoed louder than dry bones' laugh. He lifted a hand as another golden spider crawled from his hand and into mine. As it crawled onto my hand, it pushed itself into my skin, becoming a tattoo that crawled up my body, a tattoo of a spider in a web. With my skin marked, Anansi spoke.
You have seen not everyone carries others out of danger, and you have seen that far fewer would run back into danger for others. With my mark, you will never be confined by any web made by any spider.
He said in a voice that was as inviting as a campfire on a cold night. Was it you or Dry Bones who cried like an infant to get us inside? I asked Aunt Nancy, as his smile turned crooked, like when a child is hiding a frog behind their back.
Bones has no need to trick anyone into his web. All life rests in his web. He just has to move, or his prey need to move towards him. And an old storyteller like myself has already given up on crying over himself.
Anansi told me, answering my question without answering my question. He didn't need to cry over himself, but he did cry for the children. Crying I heard, and then I listened. As my eyes blinked, I fell forward into the darkness, waking up 3 days later in the hospital. First, I asked about the children. Thankfully, they were all fine, a little traumatized, and transferred to different daycares during this time, but no one else was bitten by those spiders. No one else saw old Dry Bones nor Aunt Nancy. When I shared my story with the doctors and the police, they didn't quite believe me. They believed that I went into the daycare for the other children, and that the spiders were venomous, but they did not believe that old Dry Bones was there. Even when they finally fumigated the entire daycare and cleared out the spiders, there was no giant death spider, just clusters of dead venomous spiders of an unknown species that were 30 centimeters wide. A serious oddity, but nothing esoteric as far as they were concerned. And as for my time with Anansi, my coworkers didn't believe me. They said that they saw me swaying and talking to myself before I finally passed out. The hospital also verified that the venom was likely causing hallucinations in my mind until it finally cleared from my body. The only proof that I did meet him? The mark on my skin. It's still there, and when I touch it, it feels smoother and warmer than my own skin. The golden spider in the golden web. Anansi's chosen.